Hello everyone, and welcome to my analysis on why short clears are devastating to your badminton game. From a certain perspective, badminton is a game predicated on preventing your own mistakes to preemptively nullify your opponent's opportunity to attack. In his prime, Kento Momota was one of the best players of all time at this, by using a very effective neutral game and employing crisp, accurate, efficient, basic shots. Oftentimes, where a beginning player might see the opponent's finishing net kills the shot that won a rally, an advanced player would have seen the origin of the problem 3 shots before, and the net kills the mere execution of a bleed-out, the culmination of a series of mistakes. Recognizing these mistakes in places where we give our opponent good court position, time, or space to execute what they want to do is one of the core ways we can get better. However, some mistakes are easier to recognize than others. A smash hit out of bounds, a missed serve, or a high net shot. These are all easy to recognize and understand that we made a mistake that we could rectify in the future. One of the most tricky yet common mistakes to recognize, however, is the short clear. Most clips that I show in this video feature professional players mishitting short clears such that they lose the point. In fact, there are often several good clears before the short clear to exemplify how devastating a bad one is. Today, I want to discuss what makes a clear so deceptively hard to execute, why it's difficult to realize when you've not executed it correctly, the consequences that result from mishitting it, and ways we can try to avoid doing so. In badminton, a clear is a shot played to the back of your opponent's court that allows them to hit the shuttle above the net line, thus allowing them to employ an offensive shot. A clear can be played from anywhere on the court, though most commonly it's either made as a lift from the front of the court or a clear from the far back. A lift is a subtype of clear that's made from the front of the court, generally as a response to a net drop or fast drop from our opponent. So why is mishitting a clear difficult to detect? Unlike hitting a shot out of play, mishitting a clear short can often look virtually the same as hitting a clear well. It simply falls a bit shorter. Short lifts can feel somewhat similar to a normal lift, as the angle at which you hit the lift greatly impacts the power you need. If you hit it more vertically, you need far more power than if you hit it more horizontally, even just by a few degrees. If your clear is too shallow and resembles more of a push or punch clear than a full clear, your opponent can intercept the clear even before it reaches its furthest distance, thus making its effective flight distance much shorter than you may have intended, and indeed much shorter than it could or should have flown. Say your push would land out of bounds. Your opponent will let it go and automatically win the point, but if it's to land in, then its end trajectory on the ground is much farther than when they contact it for a forehand shot of some sorts. Indeed, the fact that our opponent contacts the bird much sooner than when it would have hit the ground is a reason why it can be very difficult to recognize when our clears in particular are short. We don't have the visual confirmation of the shuttle hitting the ground too shallow in the court, and we don't have much time to consider our mistake, as a smash is most likely headed right back onto our side of the court. Not only that, but even if we do retrieve our opponent's aggressive shot as a result of our short clear and lose the point several shots later, we might blame a later shot that we should have blamed the short clear, as the bad later shot would never have taken place without having mishit a short clear in the first place. Even though I've played for 10 years, I still sometimes struggle to recognize just how short my clears are for these reasons. Unfortunately, the consequences of clearing short are even more dire and brutal than mishitting them in the first place. For ease of analysis, let us consider 2 hypothetical situations in which we lift the shuttle different distances. In situation 1, we hit a perfect lift, such that our opponent would contact the shuttle right over the back line, and they can and will execute one of the 2 primary offensive shots from this position, a fast drop or a smash. In situation 2, we hit a lift 3/4 of the way into our opponent's court, and they choose to make one of the same 2 primary offensive shots. For a more colloquial reference, 3/4 of the way is 3 feet before the double service line. Note once again that the second lift could land on the very back line, but would be cut off and played much earlier because of the angle. In situation 1, we would have significant time to react to either shot. However, in situation 2, we would have significantly less time to react to either, and any adjustments to compensate for either the fast drop or smash would result in more vulnerability to the other. For our fast drop in situation 2, the opponent needs only to hit a total distance of 3/4 of their side of the court, plus the fast drop distance of what they would need to do in situation 1. Assuming we would return the fast drop a quarter of the way into the court, our opponent would only need to hit 4/5 of the distance required for situation 1's fast drop. For a smash, it would similarly be 3/4 of the way into our opponent's court, plus the smash distance of what they would need to do in situation 1. Assuming we would return the smash halfway into our side of the court, our opponent would only need to hit 5/6 of the distance required for situation 1's smash. While these differences in distance may not seem too bad, they are significant for several reasons. First, let us consider that the shuttle slows down significantly over time due to the immense drag on the feathers, thus resulting in a quote-unquote faster shot from our opponent than it might initially appear if we assumed a linear relationship between the distance the shot is played by our opponent and time we have to return it. Research from the University of Paris shows that over the course of 0.05 seconds, the shuttle slows to about half its speed, and about 1/5 of its speed after 0.25 seconds. As we can see, with such rapid deceleration, allowing our opponent to hit just 1/5 or 1/6 less of the total distance would result in a massive speed difference when we return the shuttle, as well as an inflated time difference for us to retrieve the bird. In fact, the shorter lift might rob us of something like 1/3 of the time we would have had in situation 1, not just 1/5 or 1/6. Note that in these situations, not only am I not qualified to make exact calculations assuming air is a fluid and accounting for drag, etc., but there are several factors that I can't account for, such as the speed of the shot, the drag of the air due to humidity, any slice on the shuttle, and the increased angle as a result of hitting the shuttle closer to the net, all of which would affect the total time it would take to reach us. Any research I reference has similar constraints due to the very narrow range of conditions they test. Fear not though, as these numbers are relatively unimportant in themselves. They're merely a guide and reference point for how much worse a short clear is than a long one. What really matters is how your play and future play is affected by said clear. Do note, however, that in situation 2, given the opponent is contacting the shuttle at the same height, but closer to the net, that they have the capability to deliver the shuttle at a more steep angle, thus increasing the difficulty of retrieving the shot. Not only that, but granting our opponent more angles to play, along with the lessened reaction time, limits our ability to anticipate the shot. Anticipation is a massive part of badminton that's almost all done subconsciously through repetition and practice, and in all situations in badminton, giving our opponent more shot options lessens our ability to anticipate, and thus makes us quote-unquote slower. Lin Dan, especially in the latter half of his career, is a great example of a player who doesn't appear to move physically quickly, but effectively moves very well because of how perspicacious he is in anticipating the opponent's next shot, primarily because of the quality of his own shots. Note that in situation 1, I assumed that our opponent was skilled enough to even smash from the back of the court, which may not even be true, thus exemplifying even further how important it would be to not put ourselves in situation 2. But that's not all. We've only considered the time taken for the opponent to hit the shuttle back at us. What about the time it took for our initial lift to reach the opponent? Assuming once again a more quadratic deceleration model, the short lift would be hit by our opponent in perhaps 2/3 of the time that the longer lift would. So in total, we might not only be having to retrieve the shuttle from a more steep drop or smash angle, which would also contribute to higher speeds and offer increased options and thus more deception, but also do so with perhaps 2/3 of both the preparation time and the reaction time, which are massive, massive amounts. Now for perhaps the worst news of all. Considering all of that reduced time, we might at least be able to hope that compensating for either the superior smash or the superior drop might enable us to compensate for the other at the same time. Think again. As is evident in professional doubles play, the most effective way to consistently return smashes is to stand further back in the court, thus allowing ourselves the precious time that we would lack if we contact the bird earlier in its flight. If we took this action to allow ourselves more time for the smash, and thus grant us a better chance of returning it, we would be sacrificing the front of the court, meaning that if our opponent decided to fast drop, not only would the distance they would have to hit be far shorter than in situation 1, but we would also have to run a much greater distance due to our positioning to reach the drop in time. An inverse dilemma results from compensating for the drop, and leaving ourselves vulnerable to the smash. So how can we avoid clearing short? And are there really any potential ways to help us if we do? Well, the only way we can potentially shore up a short clear is by gambling and guessing what our opponent wants to do. Often when badminton players get to retrieve a short clear, they're so confident about their situation in the rally, and rightfully so, that they convey their intent far before they need to, thus allowing us to gamble and anticipate either a smash, fast drop, etc., therefore resulting in returns that may seem miraculous, but are more so due to our opponent's lack of focus than our big brain plays. Avoiding clearing short is best done through repetition and practice, but also attention to detail. By internalizing that it's a devastating shot to ourselves that can ruin rallies, despite its seemingly innocent veneer, we can ensure that we deliver the best lifts possible. Also, as with every badminton shot, getting to the shot early and contacting it at its highest point will allow us the best chance to consistently get a good angle and distance. I always highly recommend watching professional play to get better, and luckily for us, the short clear is virulent throughout professional play, as it's one of the most common errors. Watching and understanding why and how they got into an unfortunate position can be useful in order to avoid finding ourselves in a similar spot. Lastly, you really do have to smack lifts in particular very hard. Not only are they played with a somewhat weak form, especially from the forehand side, but to get to the steep angle and long distance desired takes a lot of power, often more so than we think. If you find yourself hitting lifts or clears deep out the back of the court, don't think less power. Instead, think even steeper and higher. In conclusion, I hope you've learned something about the causes, consequences, and corrections for short clears, and that you can use this knowledge to improve your own badminton game, or just found it interesting. To anyone who is hoping for Yu-Gi-Oh content, I became pretty burnt out after my last video, and simply haven't been feeling inspired to create Yu-Gi-Oh content. I always intended this channel as a way to think, teach, generate discussion, and help others, not necessarily as a conduit for Yu-Gi-Oh, and I hope you all understand and respect that line of thought. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.